All right, welcome back, everyone. I have a special guest, and as you guys can see, I have a new background. So bear with me. I'm trying to get situated in my new location, but I got Jamie Banks here, real estate investor, midterm rental. Well, welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. So I met you in the BASELANE landlord banking community, which is an awesome platform to use. Anyone out there looking for a software to help them with their landlord banking type needs, go check out BASELANE. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I want to know kind of more your backstory, how you got into real estate, because I saw you on social media. I believe you went from your W-2 to real estate investing in like 3 months. You went all in. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I like to say that I was a job hacker where I utilized my W-2 job to gain a lot of insight on real estate. So right out of college, I went to a large commercial real estate lender and started like originating and underwriting Fannie Mae and Freddie Mae debt on large multifamily properties. So that's what I was doing, 22 years old, fresh out of college, walking 1,000 unit buildings and didn't know what I was doing, but was really great exposure to real estate, to learning how to underwrite, and did that for 3 years, and was actually in a rotational program. So I was able to see a lot of different areas of the bank more than if I had just started as like an analyst and worked my way up, which was really cool. And then after that, I went to a large commercial real estate operator and was their asset manager and managed a little over 14,000 multifamily units. So, in that 5 or so years where I was in like commercial real estate, that really just helped me learn. So that when I first started investing in real estate, which was January of 2023, and I quit my job the end of March 2023, I felt confident. Well, I wouldn't say confident actually, but I felt, semi confident of, making that leap because I already had a, solid real estate foundation.
So why don't you tell us where you are, what market you're in? So I'm assuming, being in, like you said, commercial, you jumped right into commercial real estate.
Yeah, so it's funny because I didn't, and that's something that I'm working on now. But yeah, I started. I bought a townhome, a row home in Philadelphia. It was my first investment property. Bought it last year for a little under 120,000. So it's in the C area, but it's been great as a midterm rental. And so my strategy with midterm rentals is really running B2B, business to business. And so basically with my properties, I always find the need in that market. And so in Philly, there's most people know anything about Philly. And it's also in West Philly. People sometimes know things about West Philly from Will Smith. But it's in Philly, but Philly has a lot of old homes. Like usually the average like vintage is between 1890 to 1930s, especially with the row homes. And so what happens is if someone's row home catches on fire, floods, has some type of water damage, it's usually impacting at least the two adjacent homes in that row. And so I started working more with insurance companies who would reach out to me, basically, essentially, when they had a client whose home caught on fire or flooded or what have you, and needed some place to stay. And so I started working with insurance relocation companies and have been able to do really well in Philly. I was house hacking my home in Northern Virginia. I'm currently turning it into a full home MTR. This one I purchased in 2020 as a primary home, but once I was able to see the power of real estate, I convinced my husband for us to start renting out a room in our home to travel medical professionals as an MTR, and it paid our mortgage. And so I think my only regret is now turning it into a full home MTR. We had to stop just so we can, get some renovations done. But love hacking, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. Also own an MTR in New Orleans, Louisiana, and then just closed on a MTR in the Indianapolis market. And Indianapolis is currently where I'm focused on buying a few more.
Wow, so you're all over. I mean, you're in four different markets. Do you also know James from the other MTR group that was on my channel before?
Yeah, from Telehousing Youth Solutions. Yes, James and Dennis and Frank, that team is like It's really they're really great friends of mine, and it's funny because we have completely different, similar business models, but it's completely different because they're specialized in one area, where I am all over the world. But we swap a lot of secrets, which is always good. The MTR industry is very collaborative.
Yeah, they're always a big hit when stellar housing is on. People have so much questions. I think the midterm rental space is what a lot of people are kind of looking at now, especially with all the regulations coming down on short-term rentals and just looking, interest rates being higher, prices being higher. People are looking for ways to make things cash flow. But you did kind of touch on that you guys have in a similar space, but kind of different strategies, I guess. A little bit. Can you maybe touch on that a little bit more?
Sure. So they're concentrated in the northern New Jersey area, where I am in four different markets. And so one, I think that there's benefits and drawbacks of being in one market versus being in a lot of markets. I mean, being in one market, sometimes I'm envious because you have one cleaner, one handyman or woman, one vendor, where for me, even assuming I have no or little turnover, I at least have four of each because I'm in four different markets, and so there definitely is some efficiencies. I think for me, and just kind of part of the reason I'm in different markets is like Philadelphia was the first market that I underwrote, that I understood, that I was willing to invest in MTRs there. I closed on my first investment property January 18th, and January 31st of that year, short term rentals became heavily regulated in Philadelphia. And so essentially overnight, because I'm a data and numbers girl, I study MTRs weekly, almost daily. And so essentially the furnished rental property inventory tripled in terms of how many were MTRs, essentially overnight, basically while I'm furnishing my property and getting up and going. And so then I knew, and just I had trouble at first running before I pivoted to the B2B strategy. And so I realized Philly wasn't a sustainable market to keep buying in because of those regulations. Virginia, my primary is here. I'm in Fairfax County, which is one of the richest counties in the U.S., which is so it's very, very expensive to buy here. I bought in 2020 and was able to, get a good deal on a condo with a low rate, but it's just not sustainable. I think I always buy where I would at least break even as a long-term rental, and here, my current condo would cash flow as a long-term rental if based on 2020's price. But if I bought it at today's price, even with my same interest rate, it wouldn't cash flow. And so for that reason, I wouldn't continue here. Another thing is in Fairfax County, where I live, the restrictions and define actually midterm rentals, well, short-term rentals as being under 90 days, which essentially means a midterm rental starts at the 91-day mark or 3 month mark, and that's another reason I wouldn't continue to invest in midterm rentals here, because 3 months, while it's my primary, I'm essentially leaving most of my furniture as I'm transitioning it to a midterm rental, so it's relatively low risk in terms of, I'm not spending 20,000 furnishing it, but it's not a market and not something I always like. I have consulting clients, and I do not recommend buying here because it's a huge risk. For me, I always think that the biggest risk is midterm doesn't work and I have to sell everything, if I can't short term and be a long term. Well, you don't want to sell $20,000 of furniture. You might get $5,000 back. And usually the amount of time you're paying someone to do, help you with those transactions, it ends up being you lost all of your money. And so with New Orleans, kind of similarly, they have really strong short-term rental regulations unless the property is owner occupied, which has pushed a lot of people in midterm. Another thing I realized about New Orleans is their seasonality. It's actually different than most markets, and because it's so hot in the summer months, the summer was dead. And so just kind of how things worked out, I ended up going live a little bit before the summer. We weren't able to capture anyone before then and sat vacant all summer. And so just not a market that honestly I haven't enjoyed investing there either for a lot of reasons. And so and then that brings me back to Indianapolis, where it's a market that I visited often. I have a group of midterm rental and long-term rental investors who I, kind of met with and picked their brain before investing there. It doesn't have short-term rental regulations right now. And so essentially, in the town that I'm investing in, I just pay $50 every year for a permit. That's all I have to do. No inspection or anything like that. And then also, I found a need in the market where Eli Lilly, which is a large pharmaceutical company, is investing $12 billion in this small town. And so, right now, my plan with MTRs there is housing construction workers, and then later I will pivot to, housing the corporate workers once the plant that they're building is built. So I say all that too. I'm in a lot of different markets, but I think I've chosen the strategy, which is midterm rentals, and I've just kind of chased, different markets. And I hope Indianapolis is, a market that I can continue to buy. My goal is, larger properties there. Um, and so, that's kind of the reason why, our strategies are also different. And then, my business model and in different markets looks a little different.
I love that. And like you mentioned, you're kind of data driven and you like to crunch the numbers. We're gonna dig into it a little bit deeper about how do you manage and organize being in four different markets. But before that, kind of want to touch on how you mentioned, you went from your W-2 to real estate investor, and like in 3 months, you kind of took the leap. How did you, in that 3 months, what made you feel like you had that confidence to go all in?
Hmm. I remember, so I closed on my first property, and then a few days later, as I was like waiting for a contractor, I started walking around downtown and essentially door knocking large apartment buildings, and I found an arbitrage unit. And so basically within a week I had two MTRs and turned my home into a full home MTR. So basically in the first month of investing, I had three MTRs. And I remember three people who operate MTRs or who want to operate MTRs. MTRs are a lot of work on the front end to find a tenant because you're doing essentially what you would do as a long-term rental. And you're screening, sometimes you're coordinating, showings and things like that. And so I remember trying to do both, like even furnishing. I was working a full-time job, and then me and my husband were furnishing at night. And so I remember saying, I don't want to do both. And not liking it. And I'm someone who's really big on self care and really preventing burnout. That's something I've experienced in past jobs. And my job was also I was managing 14,000 units. Actually, it was 14,400 units. We were also, if a deal came in to underwrite, I was one of the people who would do a pre-screen. We weren't actively buying multifamily at that point, but if sponsors we had already worked with, brought us a deal, we were looking at it. And so I say all that to say I was really busy. On that team, I re-underwrote all of our properties every 3 months, and so it was constant workflow. And so I remember thinking, okay, do I want to kind of half-ass my job and and just play it safe, or do I want to go all in? And so I remember, like, talking to my husband and us realizing we really only had to live off of one income. And so, definitely our quality of life changed in terms of trips and in terms of, things that we had. Like I ended up selling my Tesla and things like that and, made some sacrifices. But for me, it's definitely been great to really to pursue it full time. And I think for me leaving when I did my job really kept the door open. I still, talk to a lot of my coworkers. Some of them, are going to become, passive partners and private lenders on some of my deals. And so I think leaving, how I did definitely just helped if I ever needed to go back, which was always my contingency plan. I'm like, if this doesn't work out in a year, I'll just go back and, at least I'm still in real estate. And so, so far I don't, have to go back and my business is making a profit. So, I hope to be an entrepreneur the rest of my life. But that was also something that I thought about when I decided to make the leap of, what would happen if I needed to come back.
I love that you said sacrifice. And I think that is the kind of one thing that does hold a lot of people back is like you said, you saw what was out in front of you, what the opportunities were, but it was going to take some sacrifices. And like you said, even, we're going to be on one income, I had to get rid of my Tesla and these things. So I love that you use that word sacrifice. I think that's the one thing that most of us investors, after a while, you realize like, oh man, if I just realize that a lot sooner in my life or my journey, I'd probably be a lot further ahead. But you talked about how many kind of or the portfolio sizes you were managing and underwriting and whatnot. So has that helped transition into you being in four different markets? And like I said, how do you manage all of this, or what systems do you use?
Yeah, so first part of your question, definitely. Of those 14,000 units, it was in 23, yeah, different markets. And so before my four markets that I invested in, last year I actually had a co-hosting business where I was co-hosting Midterm Rentals for other investors along with my own. And then I was in eight markets and had about 32 units. So being in a lot of markets. One day I'll be in one market, probably not, but I'm just used to being all around the world. So the biggest thing for me has been systemizing. While I can't systemize my cleaner, right? One cleaner is not going to go to four different states. I can systemize the process of how I want a cleaner to clean and how I want them to submit their time. I use Monday.com as my centralized operating system, and it's actually something I help other investors do. Is I built their operating systems there too, because for me, and also have a virtual assistant who, is pretty much my say like my right hand because she does the property management, she screens the tenant, she's doing, most of the work on the property management side. And to be able to make sure she's successful and I'm successful and anyone else we hire, we needed that centralized system. So even from property information, right? Like, the one thing we just did recently is change all of our Wi-Fi passwords to be the same thing because now we name off our property. So one I'm setting up right now in outside Indianapolis is called the Easton, for example. Well, we have the Easton, and every now property's Wi-Fi name is the exact same, is the name of the property, and the Wi-Fi password is the same. So that if a tenant calls and say, "Hey, what's the Wi-Fi password?" We know the Wi-Fi password because it's the same at all the properties. And I think even some things with our backup codes, our backup code in terms of like if the or we'll use the same lock. If the Slade and code lock doesn't work, we have the same lockbox, so we have the same videos that we share. This is the backup code, and then I'm more comfortable with having different codes because it's very rare that someone's going to find the property address of the other another property, from Louisiana to Indiana and drive there to break into the house, right? And so I think like if I had things down the street, there's maybe certain things for security reasons I would want to change, but for me, it's been systemizing everything except the location. And it's really helped too in improve different processes. So cleaning. I remember my first few turnovers went horribly. And so now on any given day, we are dealing with at least one property vendor. And so now we have a system. And now we know, basically if a cleaner basically gets, I think, one and a half chances and then, they're out. And so really just making sure that all of our systems, all of our bookkeeping and banking, we use BASELANE for that. And so also for rent collection. And then, we use a separate system called our Smart Move just for screening, like to pay for tenants to pay for background checks. And so all of our, systems and how we run things is the same. It's just for properties that happen to be, in different markets.
So it sounds like you got a great system in place. But has it been always that easy? I mean, what would have been the biggest struggle that you found being in four different markets?
So one, no, it has not always been this good. I would definitely say weather, and weather is still something that it's hard. And I just bought in a Midwest market, and I'm moving to Texas, so I'm going to be in the warm, worried about cold. Where in Louisiana I deal with hurricanes, and so essentially I have to know the weather in the four different markets, and I also travel pretty much half of my life, so I also have to worry about where the weather is next place I'm going on vacation. And it's very important for me. So my weather app, and now I have different notifications, and so does like my VA on like different platforms we use, so that if it's a certain thing, just so we know, because like in New Orleans, for example, this summer our power went out almost every week, and it wasn't just ours; it was everyone's power. But just some of those tropical storms just kind of always blow out the Wi-Fi and blow out the power and things like that. And so we at first we were being reactive and then having to pay to send someone over to see if things were okay. But now we just monitor the weather a little bit better. So one, we can let tenants know, and then two, we can just have the appropriate vendor lined up to go check on the property after a storm hits.
I would have never expected that weather would have been your response to that as far as the biggest challenge. But like I mentioned earlier, I had James host on Stellar Housing Solution, and even Jana who does like co-hosting and things. But it sounds like for them, their biggest thing is the customer, I guess, satisfaction or customer experience. So would you say that is something big for you, or how do you separate it for your guests or the people that are staying at your units?
So I would say yes. There are things that I try to do to combat having a negative guest experience, and I think all of us who anyone who stayed in a hotel or any type of furnished accommodation knows like if you walk in the unit and it's not clean, even if someone has your favorite drink and food out, you're not happy. And so what I do is I have a cleaner and I also have a quality control manager whose job is to just check behind the cleaner and point out any issues and then to solve those issues, right? Like don't just say, hey, there's dust. Well, clean up the dust. And then what I do with the quality control manager, who on most markets have actually hired a college student, is to they get a bonus. So they get a set amount, usually $25, to do the first quality control check. And so if the guest comes in and has no complaints in 24 hours of the cleaning, they get another $25. So essentially they're getting double as long as they do a good job. And so implementing that system at my properties has really helped because now I have two levels, right? Because my cleaner is also submitting pictures after she's cleaning, which my VA or myself are reviewing. And we hope the cleaner's being truthful. Sometimes you catch people reusing pics and things like that. But having that quality control person, that second set of eyes, and then that incentive pay has just really helped with the preliminary to make sure that the guests have a good experience. I also have vendors for everything. And so I remember I got a call on a Monday morning that like a fridge was broke and that my guests staying there, their daughter just had surgery and needed basically their medicine was refrigerated. And so that I could get someone out there that day to fix the refrigerator, but I had someone else who is just someone who's like my runner, my quality control manager, but basically he'll just kind of do small tasks for me. Sometimes he'll go to the store, he'll mail my the mail that gets sent there, things like that. He just went and picked up a mini fridge because I was like, you know what, this is gonna weigh on me all day. I was actually at the Bigger Pockets conference, and I was like, let me just handle this, so at least they have a solution because sometimes a tech will come out and they'll be like, "Oh, it's broke," right? And that's that's not a solution, and that's not going to solve the guest issue. So there's definitely times where guests have that issues, but we just try to have a person in place to be able to solve that issue. And of course, we have people who just aren't happy. I definitely have guests who, and might not have liked. Oh, the toilet broke, and but they don't want the plumber to come in. There's some guests who are more difficult than others, but I think for me, it's just I also we leave a welcome gift. Like in my cleaner or quality control manager leaves a welcome gift, and I think leaving the welcome gift, we also leave like a thank you card. Thank you for staying with us. Usually, just sets the tone of having at least a positive experience.
You also mentioned, some softwares like Baselane and Monday.com that you use. Is there any other softwares that you use, or did you want to maybe dig into any of those softwares that like Baselane or Monday.com and how you implement them?
Sure. So I'll actually do Monday first because I think Monday isn't typically used by real estate investors. And so Monday is a project management software. It also has a CRM. But a great thing about Monday is building blocks is it's very customizable. And so I've customized it where essentially it's my property management software, meaning like tenants, they submit applications through a form that goes directly into Monday. If there's maintenance requests, they fill out a form, and then me and my VA and the appropriate vendor is notified of the issue, as it is classified. If it's, oh, the toilet's broke, but there's three toilets, well, that's not an urgent issue. Where if it's only toilet and it's 2 a.m., then there's certain, then basically we can have customizations or automations in place so that we're getting notified and someone's getting notified to go as soon as possible. And so I really like it because in the midterm space, there isn't one software that does everything. Like with short term rentals, there's Hostfully, Hospitable, all of these softwares that can do, let's say, 90% of what you need. Where with midterm, before I had a long term software, a short term software, and you're paying for all these things. But it was still, especially as I was hiring and growing my team with virtual assistants, I needed a centralized hub for where if someone logs in to my business that day, this is where they go. And so I think Monday is definitely very customizable. And then for Baseline, I just look at it as my financial software. So like I have business bank accounts. If someone uses private money for my like to fund my transactions, and it's been great too because I you can have virtual accounts where this one is just to pay my private money lender or to collect their money, or this is just for this property, and I also have a deal. Well, different deals. I'm partnered with different people. So if it's my husband, I have outside partners. Sometimes it's myself, and so I'm able to have. While again, everything is different. Everything is owned by LLCs in different markets. I mean, in different states and everything like that. I like that it's fairly centralized, and then also with Baseline, I'm the only one who has control over Baseline because I can move money. I can, I'm collecting money. I'm getting tenants information, and where Monday is, I'm saying the things that like I don't mind a virtual assistant knowing. It doesn't have as much of my personal, information. And then another big thing, and a lot of people probably are using Google Drive, and I just am really, adamant about organizing the Google Drive so I can easily find things. Like I turned an application in to get pre-approved this morning, and it took 3 minutes. It was great because I had everything in my Google Drive. We basically my VA pulls like statements from different bank accounts, saves them for me. So when it's time to get my pre-approval, I can just send the folder, send the LLC, EIN, whatever they need. And so those are just like ways that I organize my business because, if, in a world that hopefully doesn't happen, I could, or me and my VA could have four different calls for, four different markets for, four different issues. If that ever happens, we just need it. And, that can grow as we're growing our portfolio. And so I just like to make sure that everything is systemized and organized so that, when those issues come up or, a pre-approval is needed, it's easy to, finish it out.
Yeah, I like the bookkeeping and the financials for the baseline. I like those functions. I think it really helps organize all your transactions and things like that. So I think that's super helpful. Yeah, let's kind of pivot real quick onto like what you're working on now. I saw your social media page, and it says something about radiate real estate and webinars. And tell me all about that.
Yeah, so Radiate Real Estate is my property management company. I only manage for myself at this point, but I also offer products and services. So I launched the Midterm Rental course earlier this year. I really, one of my biggest like values for me and for Radiate Real Estate is education. And so I've started offering just free education through webinars. So I have one coming up of how to passively invest in real estate. Like I raise private money and have been a big proponent of raising, private money and working with passive investors. When you're ready to at the point where you want to grow your portfolio, and I wouldn't have been able to grow my portfolio and buy three properties and in basically a year if I didn't have private money or if I hadn't learned that skill. And so just teaching a little bit about what private money is, kind of how to raise it and how to kind of structure deals. Especially with, I know a lot of people are maybe interested in creative deals. Like I've done a creative deal, and I've also used DSCR. I've actually used each property I financed in a different way. And so I think that's been unique where some people have only financed properties in maybe one way or two ways. And so I've just been, holding webinars to educate and, help people learn. Because one of my things for me was I was able to get started because I got free slash cheap education. I used to buy bigger, I still do buy bigger pockets books. So, spending $25 max. And I see a lot of new investors spend $5,000 on education. And then one, I think that to make your first investment, it's not about the education. It's really just about getting over the mindset and getting over being fearful. It's really scary, especially in your first one. And so I always like to say, I think for your first one, you should use free and cheap education. And so my goal is to be able to, provide that.
So anyone like new investor, like you're saying, that wants to get into the midterm rental space, like how would you direct them, or what advice or free advice would you give them? Like how would they get started?
I would tell them to go in whatever podcast app. and type in Jesse Vasquez. Just type in my name. I've done a few midterm rental podcasts. Type in midterm rentals, just type in some of those keywords. And like Jesse is really like a forward thinker in the MTR industry. And listen to all the podcasts you can. Because I know, like, for me, I've done a few podcasts where I always want to share something different. And I know, like, Jesse, Oziana McIntyre, she's one of the authors of 30 Days Stay. So many people who are in the MTR space have gave so much free information. So start there. Listen to it while you're walking, while you're running, while you're say while you're sleeping, maybe not while you're sleeping, but while you're doing, whatever you're doing in your everyday life, listen to it. There's also books like 30 Days Stay is the book that was published through Bigger Pockets that I think I've paid $25. It might be under 20 now. Those are some ways that you can get started for free or for cheap. I also hold like a weekly meetup, so if anyone can also reach out to me, call the MTR Connect, where it's free. We don't try to sell you anything. It's just MTR operators connecting, and so a lot of it is like people within the group sharing. Like we have one coming up where we're interviewing an MTR investor who's also an investor-friendly realtor, and just so she's giving us tips on how we can be better investors because we always want the realtor to be a better realtor, but I think there's ways that we can be a better investor and be more clear with our expectations and other things, to be a better partner for that realtor as well. So, I think there's so many ways that you can get free education. And I think, especially if you're someone who only has a down payment on closing costs and has limited funds, and that was me, that can be still me, in some situations. So definitely utilize the free and the, cheap resources before you spend a lot of money on education.
Great advice. And like I mentioned earlier, Jana, Stellar Housing Solution, the both times they were on, there's so much people that had questions and want to know more about what they're working on. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to reach out to you and pick your brain on things. So where can they find you?
Instagram is definitely the best way. On Instagram, it's at Jamie Banks Real Estate. And so, yeah, find me there, follow me, and then we can always start a conversation.
All right. So I'll put all of that in the comments after or in the intro section, and we'll do this again. This was a lot of fun. So thanks for doing this, Jamie.
Thank you so much.